5 KTLA, Los Angeles.
What's wrong with a man wanting to have an Earth mother for a wife?
Well, it really brings out the worst in him, in the sense that the more, to me, an Earth mother is a woman who adores her man, is passive, is submissive, is a Madonna-like figure. She brings out all his tendencies to need to perform, to prove himself, to take responsibility. She eventually comes to build up a lot of anger towards him because she's always reacting to him. She's always sort of following his lead. She's in effect taking the role of the child. In fact, I call the traditional relationship between the man and the woman a relationship between a machine and a child. The masculinity creates machine-like behavior. He's not supposed to have feelings. He's not supposed to have needs. Femininity means that she's not supposed to be aggressive. She's not supposed to be assertive. She's not supposed to be sexual. She's not supposed to be independent. The definition of a child.
The Earth Mother reinforces his self-destructive, regressive tendencies to dominate, control, prove himself, perform, or take major responsibility while also feeling himself in competition with other men for his sexual property.
Exactly. And
but aren't we all conditioned? I mean, didn't you ever want a nice young woman standing by the garden gate in a gingham dress saying, "Hi, Herb Goldberg"?
Yeah, you're absolutely. In fact, the incredible thing to me is that the more romantic the couple, and to me the image of what the football player and the cheerleader, the truck driver and the cocktail waitress, the airline pilot and the stewardess, the less these two people have in common, and the very thing that they are attracting to each other for, which is she sees him as being strong and dominant and powerful, he sees her as being adoring, passive, fragile, emotional, they'll come to resent each other for the very reasons that they're attracted to each other for, because he's going to feel that he always has to be responsible. She's going to feel she's always being put down and exploited, which is what feminism is all about. Feminism is a movement, really, which is a channel for a tremendous amount of rage and anger that's been built up over decades and has now taken on a philosophy. The unfortunate part of feminism is that women have not yet really focused on how they play into and how they actually reinforce what they hate in a man. So they may dislike being dominated, they may dislike being exploited, but they still go for the powerful, successful, direct man, and they don't take responsibility for initiating, whether it's sex or asserting themselves.
Well, are we ever going to get out of this?
Well, we're going to have to get out of it. Now we're going to get out of it more likely than ever, because women have definitely gone through a process of change now that there's no turning back from. If men don't change, the gap between the two of them is going to be enormous. You know, I was impressed with a show you had a while ago, which I know was very controversial, but with two women who were having a child without a man. And to me, you know, Christian Barnard, Dr. Barnard, the heart surgeon, said in Time magazine a little while ago that someday men may be extinct. We'll just keep a few of them in cages, and but they're not really going to be necessary. And I think unless men can learn to be more fluid, can expand their behavior, can incorporate a lot of their other parts, they're going to progressively go downhill.
Let's just a couple of quick, brief items here. You also feel that a lot of men are going through life literally as imposters. Just briefly, we'll go back and pick this up. What's your point?
Well, the point there, I talk about that in the book. I call it the imposter fantasy, which is the feeling that a lot of successful men have, or any man who has a powerful role, of any role image, that he is a fraud, that he is a phony, that he's going to be discovered for not knowing what he's supposed to know, not feeling what he's supposed to feel. So, for example, a doctor is supposed to love his patients. A father is supposed to enjoy being with his children. A husband is supposed to love spending his weekend with his family. Okay, now those images, those roles have fixed feelings. People do not have fixed feelings. And so consequently, when my feeling does not jibe with the feeling that the role is supposed to have, imposter fantasy comes up.
You'd be interested to know how many men don't like football and can't admit it.
Really?
Or how many men, I wonder, I have a feeling this is another one of those roundhouse statements, that barroom generalities that I can't prove. I think there are men who are in desperate fear that if the company fired them, or if they got hit by a car, the company would not have to replace them.
I see, yeah, yeah. The feeling of being replaceable.
Or not being needed, or of having a job that's just on the organization chart and we're not sure how it got there.
Absolutely. In fact, you know, one of the things that I feel strongly about when people talk to me about male consciousness and male liberation is that what we really need is new models, because an awful lot of men are doing a lot of things that they don't want to be doing. Whether it's getting drunk with the boys, whether it's hanging out, whether it's going to sports car races, whether it's chasing women in a flagrant type of a way, whether it's having to boast all the time about where they're at, having to deal with situations that are really painful for them, but they're afraid that if they change that behavior, some guy is going to look at them and say, hey, what's wrong with you? Are you a sissy? Are you a fruit? Do you got some kind of a hang-up? The fear of one man looking at the other man is very powerful.
You say here the pressure on traditionally conditioned men. Does your husband have this pressure, or the man in your life, or people you care about, your father? Does the man to whom you are the closest have to do these things? Constantly prove himself? Does he have to repress his needs and emotions? Does he have to take responsibility which results in feeling guilty? I don't get that.
What I mean by that is the traditional male-female relationship is actor-reactor. For example, if I'm in a courtship situation, I have to take responsibility for asking the woman for the phone number, making the first phone call, picking her up in my car, deciding on where we're going to go, spending the money, taking her home, making the first sexual advance. I literally have to...
And if you don't, you feel guilty if there's any of those that are missing.
If I blow it in any way, I feel guilty. In other words, I feel responsible. If things go wrong, then I feel guilty. She is a reactor, therefore she eventually feels pushed around. The traditional masculine-feminine relationship, which I hope someday will be passé, is destructive from both sides. The classic relationship produces rage in the woman, guilt in the male. And when I see a couple after 10 years in marriage in my office for marriage therapy, that's almost invariably the way it is. It's an angry woman and a guilty man.
Does your man have a constant need to put himself second? If he has that, you are concluding all traditionally conditioned men are therefore, you say all these things build up currents of anger and resentment. You just made that point.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then you go on to say this, all traditionally conditioned men are therefore potential or latent woman haters.
Right. In other words,
a heavy kind of conclusion.
That comes from a section where I call words of sexist masculine intimidation. There are certain words that you lay on a man and you intimidate him and you alter his behavior. Coward, impotent, latent homosexual, women hater. The thing that has allowed women to grow is that they've been in touch with their anger towards their role, in touch with their anger towards men. Men equally have certain amount of anger about their role and anger towards their women. And it's not that there's anything wrong with the woman. It's the role that they're playing in opposition to the woman, feeling responsible, having to repress and deny needs, having to close off feelings, feeling always protective, when you mentioned putting yourself second, for example, a man will have a hard time, if it's a question of therapy, he'll say, you go. I don't want to spend the money on myself. Or I don't want to buy the new clothes, you get the new dress.